Hello everyone, thanks for joining me today. I'm going to be walking you through a step-by-step painting tutorial of some really easy Christmas watercolor holiday bells, and you might think that they look difficult, but they're really not. And I'm going to provide a traceable so that you can trace this painting before you get started. You can freehand draw it if you like, but I will leave the link in my description. I'm using ultramarine blue watercolor to start with, and I'm really just filling in my bells and painting around the bow. And then I'm just sort of spreading my paint out a bit. For the bell on the right, I started the same way. I outlined a bit, and then it was a little dark, so I did add a little bit of water and thinned the paint just a little bit because I want to create a little bit more value, variety. And for watercolor, you want to start light. You don't want to start too dark because it's difficult to lift it once you've put it down, and it's really hard to layer over top. So I'm just going back in, and I'm using a round number 8 brush, and I'm just defining the edges. And if you go outside the original lines, that's okay. It really doesn't matter. And don't worry if your lines are perfectly smooth. That doesn't matter either. My process is really about enjoying working with the color and just trying to relax and de-stress. If you're new to my channel, I'm Kathleen, and I'm a teacher and an artist, and I've been teaching for over 30 years in fine art and design, and currently I work with aging adults. And you'll find most of my tutorials on my channel are really simple, total beginner, easy. Anybody really can do these because I work with aging adults. We have some physical challenges, we have some cognitive challenges, and so I try to make things really, really simple and easy. So once I finished my bells, and I added a little bit of a darker paint at the bottom to sort of create the inside the bell shape, and then I picked up a little bit of water in a much larger flat brush, and I'm just tapping some light blue all over the background and being very uneven and just being loose and expressive. I decided I wanted to make my bow sort of a dark gray black color, and you might notice I also have gone in and I've gone over my pine branches very lightly, just drawing some simple curved lines, and that's just going to be the beginning of my pine branches. So I'm filling in some gray, and I'm really being expressive here. I'm not filling the entire area in. I'm just sort of adding some darker edges and adding different values of gray. I'm just moving my brush around really quickly, and I try what I call my method of painting. I call it my messy method of painting. And it's messy because, I move my brush around a lot. I just really love creating variety and different mark making. So now what I'm doing is I'm picking up a much smaller brush, and I'm going in and creating pine needles on my branches. And what you want to do with your pine needles is you want to have them start wider at the bottom and get narrower and smaller as you get towards the top until it ends in a point. So you're really going for almost, it's like a little mini tree shape. One of the things I have found with students is when they're doing pine branches, they have a tendency to go one of two ways. Either they make them really, really full and really overdone, or sparse, and they sort of look like the Charlie Brown Christmas tree where they don't have enough branches or enough pine needles. So you kind of want to have a little bit of a happy medium. You don't want to overfill your pine branches, but you want to have enough that it doesn't look like that it's just a single branch. So I'm coming back in now, and I'm painting my plaid in, and I'm using a dark blue with the same small brush, and I'm really just creating a checkerboard. I'm just doing 2 stripes on each side of my bow, vertical, and then 2 stripes horizontal on the tails of my bows. So I'm going back in now with a little bit of a darker green. My pine needles have dried, and once they dry, they do get a little bit lighter. Watercolor dries lighter, so I did go back in with a darker green, and I decided to use that green in the bow as well and add a little bit of a green stripe to create more of a plaid. And I had forgotten to put the blue stripe on the center of the bow. So I came back in then and I added the blue stripe and added a couple more stripes to the tails of the bow with the green. And I wanted to add a little more depth to my bow, so I used some gray paint that had a little bit of the blue mixed in, just to add some depth and shadow and value to my bow. I'm taking some of that ultramarine blue that I also mixed with a little bit of black, and I'm really almost sketching here with my paintbrush, and I'm coming in along the edges, I'm filling in the curved area at the bottom, and I'm moving all over the place. I like to work quickly, and I also like to move around. I like to turn my page. It gives me a little bit of a different perspective, and it helps keep my work a little bit looser. Now I'm coming in and just adding some small circles for my holly berries, and you can even leave a little dot of white in the center. And I'm just putting them around randomly. I had an idea ahead of time, but I just was very random with the berries. And now I have a very fine tip felt pen that it's a permanent pen, and I'm just adding some sketchy lines to the outside. I love to use ink in my watercolors. You don't have to do this if you don't want to, or it makes you nervous. You can practice on a side piece of paper first if that makes you feel more comfortable. And I'm just adding just a really sketchy look to the outside and just adding a little more detail. I just think it adds just a nice little extra element and creates some more interest. I'm just very quickly drawing some lines around my berries, and I'm also going to do the same. I'm going to add some pine needles, and you don't want to overfill. I am leaving some space in between. You don't want to overdo it, but I think it just makes the pine needles stand out and just be a little bit more expressive with the ink. The last thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to add some gold paint, and I'm just adding some highlights around the edges of the bell and on the inside of the bell. I'm gonna add the gold paint all over. I'm gonna add some to my bow. I'm gonna add some to my pine needles. And again, I just think this adds a nice little layer of interest, and rather than just watercolor, I like to do mixed media. So by adding the ink and adding the gold, it not only allows you to play with different materials, but I think it just really adds an extra fun element to your painting and really adds some interest. Now that I've added my ink and I've added some gold, I'm coming back in with some blue paint on my brush that has quite a bit of water in it, and I'm tapping one brush on top of the other, and this is creating a spatter technique. I love to do spatter. Only is it fun to do, but I like the effect that it gives for a finished painting. Once I finished adding some more of the blue paint for spatter, I thought that my bow needed a few more highlights, and it seemed a little too dark. So I came back in with some white gouache, which is similar to an acrylic paint. If you don't have gouache, you can use acrylic paint, or you could use a white paint pen. And I'm just adding some very light white detail. If you're interested in making the same painting in a different color, I have another video which I will link that shows how I created this exact same painting in 3 different ways. I made a red one, I made one that had blue with green and red accents, and then I had this one. Thank you so much for joining me today.